Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about Star Augur, arguably the easiest fight in NIGHTHOLD. I found he was even easier to do than the first 3 bosses. But anyway, let's get right to it. First thing you need to do is separate your raid into 3 areas around Star. And you want to split up the group evenly. Now we just did a split between healers, ranged, and melee. But if you want to go ahead and separate them evenly, you're going to need at least 3 people in each group. So the first thing is the tank needs to stand away from these 3 groups. He's going to be using these 3 groups accordingly to shake off a debuff. The only thing to know in phase 1 is if you get a debuff where you have a giant circle underneath you, you need to run out of the group and not hit anyone else with it. As a tank, when you get the star circle underneath you, you're gonna have to rotate what group you run into. You need at least 3 people to take this buff off. The only other thing that happens in phase 1, in LFR you never have to worry about freezing anyone, and in heroic mode you're gonna have more AoE damage going out, which means you should for sure have people stacked. So here you see the first thing that DPS and healers have to deal with, which is this circle on the ground. Once the tank gets the gravitational pull debuff, the other tank has to taunt off. Now here you see the tank over on the left. He's going to let the meteor hit him first. Once the frost debuff applies, he runs into a group. There needs to be at least 3 people in that group in order for him to wear that debuff off. If the tank runs into the same group, he will freeze everyone. This is why you have 3 groups, in order to split up 3 debuffs. So again, here in the corner you see the tank. He takes the initial hit, becomes the frost debuff, and then runs into the group. Now I have the debuff, he taunts off, and again you're going to see this repeated over and over again. It is also very important for the tanks to go in the same order. The reason you saw somebody freeze there is because that person dashed through the boss, still had the debuff from the last part, and got frozen. That's what happens if you run into the exact same group. People get frozen. So again, run into groups 1, 2, and 3 in order. Once you run into the 3rd group, swap tanks because the other tank is going to have the debuff. As DPS or healers run out of the group if you get the AoE debuff underneath you. And that's all of phase 1. Again, in LFR, you don't have to maintain the same order because nobody can get frozen. And again, step out for the purple and step in for the ice. That's the one you need to split. Now here we have the transition into phase 2. Random people are going to get debuffs that make them drop Fellfire. You want to drop this on one side of the platform. Pick one side of this platform and drop the debuffs there. Now in our attempt we had people dropping stuff everywhere, but if you're doing heroic this is going to be a lot more crucial to you. Now in this case when the tanks get the debuff, what happens is when the meteor hits them, they actually clean up the patches of Fell on the ground. So when one tank gets the debuff, the other tank taunts off, and that tank has to go around cleaning the Fell patches. You see the other tank doing that here. So as DPS, try to not drop Fell patches in melee, and if you're doing heroic, try to keep them away from the edges, just because you're going to need those edges. Now the difference between normal and heroic mode is that in heroic mode, Star Augur will actually also cast Fell Nova, which does damage according to how close you are to him, which means you have to run to the edge of the platform to not take that much damage. So if you're running heroic, drop the Fell patches on one side, and when Fell Nova gets cast, run to the edges of the other side. So again, the big thing to note here is to drop the Fell patches away from where you want to be standing or DPSing, and the tanks have to go on cleanup duty, hitting the Fell patches with the meteor debuff. Now you don't have to worry too much about where the Fell is when you transition, just because when you transition to phase 3, all of these Fell patches get cleaned up. So here we are, the transition into phase 3. So what's going to happen in phase 3 is when the tank gets the debuff, he has to run out of the group and he will spawn an ad. This ad is #1 priority, and the only ability that this ad really has is a cast that when he finishes this cast will fear you if you're facing him. Think the ushers in Karazhan. If you face them when they cast flashlight, you'll be blinded. If you face this ad, he will fear you for 8 seconds. Now you do see my stacks of the debuff are getting extremely high here. That's why dealing with this ad is very high priority. Your tanks will not be able to solo tank this phase efficiently, so they need to swap tanks as soon as the debuff is handed out to be able to swap these stacks. So again, when the tank gets this debuff and spawns the ad away from the group, that ad is the #1 priority. #2 priority are the tiny ads you see here, the voidlings, and then the 3rd priority is Star Augur. Now the only difference between LFR, normal, and heroic is that in heroic mode you actually have another Nova being cast that hits everyone, and this cast is actually unavoidable and just part of the damage in phase 3 for heroic. So in phase 3 for heroic mode, you want to pop Bloodlust and healing cooldowns, and that really does it for Star. It's more about your tanks and how they handle their debuffs and positioning for everyone. Phase 3 is about ad management, killing the ad first. It's a very simple fight. The boss does not move and cannot move, so all you need to do is handle the mechanics, which are very simple. Anyways guys, I hope you guys are having fun in NIGHTHOLD. Go out there, get your tier pieces. This wraps up all of the NIGHTHOLD guides. If you need help with any single boss, go ahead and look at my channel or click here. I will have guides for every single boss, LFR, normal, and heroic. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, good luck out there.